Britain is about to begin. Upon this battle depends the survival of Christian civilization. The whole fury and might of the enemy must very soon be turned on us. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duty. So bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its commonwealths last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
pray. God our Father, graciously hallow with your blessing this cathedral church. May it be a place where the sorrowing find comfort and the tempted strength, where the lonely find fellowship and the sinner forgiveness, where the faithful find grace and all offer you a holy worship. In the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
So Southwick House, which we're going to visit, was the headquarters of this operation. Originally it was just the headquarters for Admiral Ramsay. He'd been bombed out of Portsmouth. He literally helped himself to Southwick House, evicted the owner, Colonel Thistlethwaite, who protested to the end. He didn't want to leave his lovely home, but out he went, and in came the Admiralty. And it was also set up as a command post for Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion. And that's where Ike took up residence in the grounds in his trailer. Montgomery similarly in a house in the grounds, and all their staff.
Now, one of the worst things about Normandy was the weather. On the 4th of June, Group Captain Stagg, who was in charge of the Met team, said to Eisenhower he didn't think the weather was going to be suitable for landing on the 5th. The only person who wanted to go on the 5th was Montgomery. Anyway, so it was decided to postpone the landing, the D-Day, to the 6th. Now, I'd like you to just visualise, if you would please, by that time the channel was full of ships, who all then received a message postponed to 24 hours. So all the ships had to turn round, steam away for 12 hours, turn round and then steam back again. On the 5th, Stagg said he thought it was going to be all right on the 6th, and Eisenhower made the historic thing, okay, let's go. So the landing started on the 6th.
We came in the end of 43 and the build-up to 44. We had thousands and thousands and thousands of Allied troops all packed up here in England. On the enemy side, there'd been a change of command. Von Rundstedt had been appointed a new second-in-command, and his name was Rommel. And von Rundstedt and Rommel had very different policies about how an attack and invasion was to be stemmed. Von Rundstedt believed in mobility of his armour. He thought if he kept his armour away from the beach and had it mobile, when the unexpected attack at an unknown place occurred, he'd rush his armour in and drive the attackers back to the sea. Rommel, he thought that the enemy should be, the attackers, us, the enemy, should be defeated on the beaches. And so between January and March, they start to build all these terrific beach defences, all the nasty spiky things, the tetrahedrons, the stakes, the spikes, the porcupines, all booby-trapped with mines and shells and all sorts of other explosive devices to destroy the landing fleet. Retaliatory action couldn't be taken because it would give the game away, because there was a whole series of deception manoeuvres happening called fortitude. A lot of build-up of dummy kit up in Kent to kid the enemy. We were going to attack across the Pas-de-Calais, straight across from Dover, where it was the shortest place from A to B. And this plan had to go forward. We had to rather ignore these new defences. So that was the sort of situation in the spring of 1944.
important because I was a participant. Now, the association I belong, the 2nd Air Division Association, which are all B-24s and so forth, were having their annual meeting in the States. And I felt that many of those people weren't that associated because they were back there in the base. They didn't get the actual feeling. It was the air crews that got the interest. So that's what I bought. I thought, I'm not going to see many of these 50 anniversaries the rest of my life, you know. I know it comes along once in a while. If you don't take advantage of it, that's it. The first Berlin mission we were on, we were leading the upper right squadron, and they check their guns out when they go over the border. So here came down all these little gadgets that keep the shells together for the machine guns, and it severed one of our oil lines, so we had to peel off and come home. Fortunately, we got credit for the mission. Then 3 days later, I flew with the group lead plane, and we went back to Berlin. Now that was a sight to see.
What the infantry was doing, of course, I was a munitions driver, so I wasn't on the front line, but close enough.
Close enough, too close.
So I was a couple times ahead of it. In fact, I went across a road that was mined, never hit a mine. And after I got enough, they took out about 15, 20 mines behind me. And the truck driver was riding behind me. He said, from now on, I'm going to ride in your tracks. I know the Germans were attacking, but we were surrounded, so we were trapped for 10 days. And
Where?
in above Clairvaux in Luxembourg. And Clairvaux fell about the 2nd day, I guess. And the first shell that came in on the 16th came right through the chateau we were in the roof, barn roof. And the next day they put one right in the same hole. Take $1 million to do it over, but I wouldn't take $1 million from my experience either.
So we're on our way, and the crossing time is not far short of 6 hours. Again, the good news, the sea's gone down.
You're doing?
I always had the feeling like they're not going to shoot at me. I didn't do anything to them.
I'm a guest.
I'm just here because I have to be. I mean, you operate properly, but you feel like if they're going to hit anybody, it's him.
And it usually was, thank goodness.
And then I'm going to try to run into Omaha Beach so that everybody can see Omaha, because we're not going to be able to get onto the beach or anywhere near it tomorrow because we just haven't got a license. We're doing Utah tomorrow, June 6th. So we've got to assume that we're members of the US 4th Division. Program for today. We're heading out to San Meriglise, which is a long run, and we hope with this weather that we will see the parachute drop and also go into the village. And then this afternoon, I'm hopeful, because we've got the Colville sticker, that we will go to Omaha Beach.
I mentioned to my son once that I really wanted to go, and I said, if your father was living, I said I'd see that he got to come no matter what I had to do.
The men were frozen, unable to move, he said. I tried to get them organized. There were only 6 out of my boat still alive. The water was filled with bodies. Now the rising tide began to reclaim Omaha Beach. Retreat was impossible. Said Major Sidney Bingham, if the enemy had had any enthusiasm and moved toward us, they could have run us right into the channel. General Norman Cota came ashore into the maelstrom that was Omaha and made a critical decision. Because of the crushing German fire, the troops couldn't get up the draws. Instead, they would have to go over the seawall.
It is the defense of causeways over streams and over flooded areas which became of vital importance to the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions when they landed on the extreme west flank. And Rommel, in his attempt to protect and defend Normandy, had flooded the valleys of several rivers, most notably the River Dive. So in fact, the whole of the eastern flank of our thrust ashore was protected to a degree by the flooding of these various rivers. And it was exactly the same problem arose here as arose on the American airborne landings, in that a lot of men very regrettably parachuted into the water, and because they were carrying so much equipment, they drowned. A very remarkable action took place on the Dives at a place called Trour, where a Major Robespierre with a jeep, which had landed in a glider, towing a trailer filled with explosives, and they arrived at Trour, and they charged down the high street of Trour, being shot at all the way. But they lost their Bren gunner off the trailer, but Major Robespierre was able to reach the bridge, place his charges and blow the bridge. So this meant that the flank was protected from the 21st Panzer Division. We'll be coming up to fairly soon, where the American First Army and the British Army joined up.
You should remember that there was a distance of some 15 kilometres between the western end of the British landing area and the eastern end of Omaha, one of the American landing areas. It was vital that this gap be closed as soon as possible. The move west to capture Arromanches was undertaken by 3 battalions of the British 231st Brigade, the Devonshires, the Hampshires and the Dorsetshires. It was in these outskirts that there followed a fierce and costly battle.
I landed within, about from here to the trees, about 100 foot away there was a machine gun nest, but I just lucky that I landed on the other side of the river. I mean, other side of the hedgerow. Oh, he was shooting up, like shooting at birds up there. In our regiment, I lost my battalion commander, company commander, my S2 officer, that's intelligent officer, my first sergeant, and 3 men in my stick. Oh, here they come. See there? Here they come.
Can you tell me while they're doing this, talk to me about it, would you? Perhaps some commentary, yeah.
Well, this is the reenactment of the jump on D-Day.
Right.
Where they got, you watch when they come out of here in the back.
Oh, these are regular trucks.
to flying the balls, I used to tell them, whenever you're going to use a relief tube, let me know, because then I could turn the ball, facing back. And they would forget, and they would use a relief tube, and the slipstream would pull the urine out, and it would hit the ball, and it would just be instant frosted glass. I couldn't see anything. And I used to tell them. I finally got tired of telling them. So then what I used to do is, in the orderly room, they used to have what they call pro kids. And the pro kids had some medication and also some condoms. So I just grabbed a whole bunch of them, went to the airplane, and cut the relief tubes off, and scattered the packages around. And then the navigator came on the intercom when we were over Germany, and he says, I can't find the relief tube. And then I called him back and I said, well, look on your workbench, you'll find something on your workbench that you can use. He says, well, I'm not looking to make love right now. He says, I want to relieve myself. I said, well, just take the rubber and use it, tie a knot on it, put it on the floor. In about 5 minutes, it'll be frozen solid. They'll throw it in the bomb bay. I can just think of the confusion that we can create in the Germans' mind. They'll think they were having a chemical warfare. And that was about it.
This would enable us to just have a look at the church that Fuller Gordon and his squad helped to repair after they got a sign up in the church apparently. And then we could swing through Saint-Lô, which would satisfy those of the 29th, and then head up straight to Omaha. Can anybody see a church?
We were stationed real close to you, and artillery tore this up, and we took up a donation of $900 and something, which don't seem like much now, but it was a good bit then, to help repair the church from artillery damage.
Saint-Lô-Perrier Road. You'll notice that it's almost dead straight. That's why Bradley picked it to a degree, because it was easily identified from the sky, so that he could try to persuade his bombers, or the bombers of 8th Air Force, to easily identify it and knock the hell out of the German defense, or words to that effect.
Yet again, and then we'll go on to this official reception tonight, which is held between 7 and 9 o'clock in the Salle Omnisport in the Rue de Carrel in Caen itself again.
My name is Jack Hartz. We were in a Bren gun carrier, and we went into this house, and we ran into a pile of Germans in front of us, and we went into this house anyhow, and tried to hold off a counterattack by them, which we did the first counterattack. And they put another counterattack in, second one. And we held that one off, and then they brought a German tank up. And this was a Panther tank, German Panther, 88 millimeter on it. He put a shot into the building. First one was an armored piercing, and right through the building. And then the second shot that came in, it was a high explosive one. It came in alongside of my head, left of my head. I was fired out a window, on the left side of the window. And it exploded, blew me backwards, and I had a well, but I didn't think I was really that blind. I just thought it was, Burton. The dust and the bricks and everything was in my face, That I had my throat was cut down here on the left side, part of my jaw here. I was bleeding bad out of there, but I got on the runway, and then we went that afternoon they flew us back to England.
I came in on with the Winnipeg Rifles, and I was a stretcher bearer. We got a dry landing. We were lucky. About 2 inches, or about 4 inches water is all we walked off into. But they were sniping from a pillbox right up on the beach there at us. And we came in with a bunch of engineers who were heavily loaded to do the mine sweeping, you see, on the beach. And one of them got hit in the ankle just as he got off the barge, and he went down. And so we hollered for a stretcher bearer, but our orders were not to stop on the beach for anybody, to go up to the bank.
Which beach was that, sir?
That was Juneau. And it was something to remember. And then there was a rabbit that headed down the beach with all this was going on, just to lickety-split down the beach.
Oh, he enlisted when he was 19. He went to Britain, and he went all through that training. And then some of the commando training, he broke his leg. And but he got better again, and then he was on the beaches, and he got as far as the Falaise Gap. And then there was some altercation. He was wounded on the 14th of August, and he died on the 18th of August.
The 9th Artillery, Royal 1st Airborne Division. Division is based in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. La 101e Division de l'Infanterie à Épaule-Corsée.
But I have a cousin buried over here that I'll be going to his grave this afternoon. He was shot down in 1942 over Lille, France. And then the Americans, after the war was over, they asked the parents or the next of kin if they wanted the bodies sent back to the States or if they wanted them interred over here. And my aunt chose to have my cousin interred over here. So I'll be visiting his grave today.
Sailors and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you.
And I just got started to go in. And they come back and said, we're pulling out in 10 minutes. So I never had that hot shower. It had to stay there. Time to go to the next thing. You know,
it was really nice when you were able to get cleaned up once. Yeah. I felt like a whole new person.
I was not lucky enough to be in there long enough to be able to come back to a rest area, because when I went in France, I didn't get to stay there but a very short time, probably 2 to 3 weeks, but I don't remember the dates on it. And then I was back in Cherbourg. Then when I went back to my outfit, I went down to Brest, joined them, went right across these other armies that had already moved in to Belgium and Holland. I went right on back into Holland. Got right there on the border of Germany, and we got reorganized. Went right on into Germany. Then 4 days after we pushed off in there, well, they wiped us out, and I was beat up from then till the end of the war.
And when we had that great push, Pat was in charge. It was the 3rd Army then, and we were moving up into Bastogne. And of course, that's where I got wounded in Bastogne, where an 88 come through the top of the shell. I mean, through the turret and exploded inside. That's where I got my arm broke up. My face was all scars and shrapnel in my eye and everything. And I can remember what I did is I looked on the tank, and there's one of my fellows. I know he was dead. And so, like you say, then all you're thinking of then really is yourself. I feel there wasn't too much I could do, so I climb over the turret and down on the fender, and then hit the ground, and then you crawl on the ground, and all you're hearing is the German machine guns, like, they're fast. Ours were like a pump gun.
Oh man, they can shoot a lot faster than you think.
Yeah.
They couldn't get off just a few rounds when they touched that trigger. There's a lot of lead going out of them.
So then what happened when I got out on the ground, I crawled on my stomach as much as I could, and then I got picked up by the medics.
Seemed like I would just get dozed off after they was there, and there she was again. But those nurses, they would not. They would work sometimes 18 hours, lay down 2 hours, and be right back working again.
Our patients were so sick. They were so sick that it didn't matter what time they were, what they were. They were just so sick. So, they were really serious. Sometimes they all died. Sometimes 50% of them died. It's they were just badly wounded people, badly wounded.
My reason for being there was for helping the doctor. And I asked the head doctor, you know, if I could have someone to help me. He said, oh, just go get a warm body. You know? If it was warm and moving, it didn't make any difference. Ask him.
Orduff. And it was near a village, and I heard them say that the village said they didn't know it was there. But when we got there, we went in and looked, and there was a lineup of bodies, dead, all skin and bones, naked and dead. And then there were two fat bodies there that were the commanders of the camp, and they killed some. Whether we killed them or who killed them, and they made the villagers come and bury these bodies.
I felt like that I have relived parts of the battle by hearing all the stories from all the other veterans, and it has been nothing but a pleasure.
Hitler decided on a massive counterattack against the Allies, and the counterattack, he decided, would also have some political connotations. What he wanted to do was to drive a wedge through the Allied lines, so dividing the British 21st Army Group in the north and the American 9th and 3rd Armies and 1st Armies to the south. He felt that if the British were isolated in the north, then what would happen is that the Allies could very well fall out, but his object and his target was the port of Antwerp. Bridges, roads and rivers. There were some vital crossroads in this thrust forward, and one of the most vital crossroads was, of course, Bastogne. The importance of this battle was that Hitler was throwing into the battle virtually his last armoured reserves.
The thrillingest part of the whole thing was when those airplanes came over. And we needed those airplanes, and you know, you're hungry, you're tired, and everything like that. And you have to, oh boy, you see that's, you know, you got some support then. It's like being in a ring with a bunch of bulls. You got to fight your way out. If you want to get out, you have to fight to survive. That's where it went.
So he said fight or die, right?
Yeah, your mind just goes, hey, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die with the rest of them. And if you go by yourself, what are you going to do? You're going to be alone? When I got to Bastogne, and well, of course, the only thing is I didn't know where I was basically because I got wounded. And then when I got to Bastogne, I was picked up by the medics, taken to this tent, and they were still bombing in the tent. And then the most important thing I can remember, well, I remember it all, but the most important thing was I'm laying on the not like an operating table, and a fellow says to me, Howard, what are you doing here? And come to find out, he was a doctor who lived in my hometown, whom I went to school with. I could not believe it.
That prior to D-Day, 32,000 airmen had gone down, not necessarily killed, but they had gone down. A lot of them were prisoners of war, and a lot of them were never found afterwards because the instructions that we used to get were that if you go down, at the beginning, they would tell us to give ourselves up to the Wehrmacht, which was the army, or the Luftwaffe, but never surrender to anyone in a black uniform, or to civilians to surrender to them. Later on, as it turned out, the civilians, all airmen, that were coming in towards the end of the war, they would actually kill them and bury them in the field, and there were an awful lot of them that could never be accounted for. But that's a little bit of trivia that a lot of people are not aware, that 32,000 airmen had been lost prior to D-Day.
I would say probably half of the doctors we had were Jewish. And they caused a lot of trouble by hectoring all of the other Germans. One of the doctors, who was Jewish, decided he would put his own hand in it. And when he had him in surgery, he took a bottle of saline, put a Y in the tube, and took 2 large bore needles and inserted one under each nipple. When he came out of surgery and was out in the wards, the doctor was there waiting for him. And he had quite sizable breasts at that point. And he woke up and with all this pain wanted to know how he was he going to make it, etc., etc. And the doctor said, yes, everything went fine. So, what's all this pain? He said, well, before I put you under, you said you wanted a sex change operation. And I said, why not? I have the time and I need to practice.
We're outside of Bastogne, and in back of me is the statue, anyway, of General George C. Patton, who we all know, old blood and guts, our blood and his guts. Or was it his guts and our blood? Anyway, there he is back there. We just came from the museum, wonderful museum over here, Arlon Museum, and I can only say that this trip has been a fantastic one.
Some of the trip has been like in a time warp, because I feel that they've recreated the period and the history a little bit too close for comfort, as they say, too realistic. But I'm very glad that we had the opportunity to be here at this time.
The Baraque de Frateau, which is fairly close here on the right, in 12 kilometers, was quite a battle. 2 engineers went forward to investigate, snapped off a few rifle shots and retired. The bazooka team fired, although they had no target. But he rushed the Stavelot Bridge. The demolition was apparently sabotaged by a Grief Commando unit and headed for the next river crossing at Trois Point. Again, combat engineers intervened, this time by blowing 2 bridges and forcing Piper from his direct route. Losing precious time and consuming irreplaceable fuel, Piper turned north towards La Glaise. He captured an intact bridge, but his success was short-lived. A rare early on the 19th Battalion of the 30th Division recaptured Stavelot, thus isolating Piper from the balance of 1st SS Division. Over the next 3 days, the Germans tried desperately to carve a supply route to Piper's isolated spearhead. They failed. Meanwhile, employing overwhelming force, the American vice around Piper squeezed. On 23rd of December, Piper abandoned his mission and led a remnant of his unit on foot back to German lines. Kampfgruppe Piper, the unit that had come closest to fulfilling Hitler's scheme, had failed.
Cemetery outside of St. Mary-Galise, and I guess that was a cemetery for the 82nd, 101st paratroopers. That stuck in my mind. In fact, that was the thing I wanted to make a point to see when I came back here. And we were dug in, and all of a sudden this big tank comes over the rise. And for some reason I got mesmerized, because he was throwing tracers instead of ducking. I'm kind of in a trance watching the tracers. The word came down, get the hell out of there, and we kept running back until we got in a position to dig in. They told us to dig in again. I went to reach for my shovel, and it had been cut off right from my cartridge belt. That's how close I guess the shell got me. One other engagement, I don't know where we were, that sticks in my heart, was we were dug in along the woods. There's an open field, the other side with the Germans, and they sent down 2 or 3 replacements. To me, they looked like young kids at this time. I was the old man. And well, I started at 21, this is 3 years later, 24. And the kids are coming down at 18 at this time. We heard the plop, plop, plop of the mortars. So we hit our holes. And this one kid, it was in the back of my mind while I was laying there, didn't even seem to budge, didn't even seem to lay down. Sure enough, we got out of our holes, he was gone. He didn't last, not even a half hour. And I lasted 8 months. I don't know how.
What made you come back then?
More for kind of pay my respects to the guys that stayed here, the ones that were left behind.
There was a battle here, and the Americans held off the Germans for 4 days, 3 days actually, so they couldn't advance, and gave the Americans time to regroup.
Roses are shining in Piccadilly in the hush of the silver dew. Roses are flowering in Piccadilly, but there's never a rose like you. And the roses will die with the summertime, and our roads may be far apart, but there's one rose that dies not in Piccadilly. 'Tis the rose that I keep in my heart.
This, of course, has not been a normal trip. It must have stirred many memories of old friends and places. Many of them not happy. It takes courage to come back, particularly if you were wounded and had some traumatic experience whilst you were in this continent 50 years ago. I hope this tour has given you all the big picture so that you can reflect on your place in the whole thing. We have covered the preparations in the UK, Operation Overlord, and the Battle of Normandy, and also the Battle of the Bulge in the Ardennes. I would particularly like to thank all of you for making it such an enjoyable tour. I would like to thank Howard for getting his timing right. And Jack for his humour.
What?
Lynn Harris, who's left us, of the 29th, for being so modest. Not many of us have faced a firing squad. Mildred and Ed for their stories on how important were the medics. I am sure Mildred's presence will have reassured many a wounded GI. Harry and his inquisitiveness. Still at it today. Escorted back by 2 policemen, would you believe? He'd forgotten all about the Follies Bergère. Frank, the waist gunner. Steady and sound. Seymour's humour. Ira's photography. Everybody, in fact, played a part in making things go. Dick and James, Ray and 1 or 2 others, bouncing a car out of the way, getting us into Paris. After all the blood and guts of Normandy and the Ardennes, the beautiful weather in Paris, and the uplift to our spirits of the architecture, the marvellous architecture, what a contradiction to what we have reflected on over the previous 2 weeks. Right. An uplift in nature. Right. It gives us, I hope, great hope for the future. Without doubt, however, my most memorable event was the very humble church in Gonfreville, repaired by Fuller's regiment, even in times of great stress and hardship. Men could give their time to do some good. I am sure that the message of Gonfreville will remain with us. I would like us all to rise, and an even simpler toast, but a more profound one. And the toast is, ladies and gentlemen, absent friends. Absent friends.
And you're smiling. Oh, when you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you.